In this session we're going to have a look at methods in ActionScript 3. Now we're able to create methods where an object can have some code assigned to it, and we can actually use the object to give us information. So what I've done, I've actually imported SpongeBob onto the screen here right now, and he's actually an object. So we can actually convert him into something like a movie clip. So we want to convert to a symbol, and we're going to make him a movie clip. And this will allow us to assign code with him and also put event listeners on him so we can actually hear for things to happen. So in this case here, I'm going to put his name in like SpongeBob, and because he's a movie clip, I'm going to just put MC on the end, otherwise you can have underscore MC or the naming convention that you're using. So I'm just going to click OK, and this adds him to my library. But this is SpongeBob that's on screen. At the moment he is just an object. He is from my library and he is a class now. But what we need to do is actually give him an instance name. So just to refer to SpongeBob, I'm going to try to keep it really simple. I'm just going to call him MC SB. So once again, it's a movie clip and SB for SpongeBob. You can add more detail in there if you wish, but I wouldn't try to change much more. I wouldn't go any shorter than that at the moment. So this is its instance name, and this is what we'll be referring to this object here. Now we can actually find out some information from him. At the moment I've got a layer that has SpongeBob on it. Really, this is my graphical layer. So I'm going to change the layer name to GUI by just double clicking that. And then what I need to do is add a new layer, and this layer needs to be above the GUI, and this is going to be my AS3 or ActionScript 3 layer. This layer will contain all my code. All my graphics will be on this layer here. You can have as many layers as you like. Generally my stacking order is script on top, images in the middle, obviously the foreground's on the top there, and whatever layer going down is further to the background. And if I've got an audio track that's part of the timeline, I actually place the audio tracks right at the bottom. So let's get underway. Well, we've got SpongeBob here and we need to look at what are methods. Well, we can actually find out some information about SpongeBob. So what we're going to do is we're going to move in and have a look at our action script. So I'm going to open up my actions pane and reduce that down to obviously a level that is more appropriate for us to see on screen. Now with the action pane, you need to make sure that I normally collect, well, once you've selected scene 1, we know we're on scene 1. The first one I'm going to place here is stop, STOP bracket bracket semicolon. This is to stop the playhead from playing, and you can close these little windows over if you want to. I'm just going to close mine down because I really don't need to see those at the moment. I'm just going to slide it more into the center of the screen so we can see what is happening. Now some people will just keep collapsing it like that, otherwise you can have the button sort of instance of it as well. Now I said before, now we can refer to SpongeBob. Now we see SpongeBob behind there and we know our properties of SpongeBob. If I click on here, we know that he's got a name MCSB. So I'm just going to copy that, saves me typing it out. What I can do, I can actually find out information about SpongeBob. So to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to trace some information out. So what I'm tracing at the moment is MCSB. So SpongeBob himself is like a variable, and in that variable there's different information in there. And what I want to know from SpongeBob is what his X position is right now. So I'm going to trace that X position out, and I'm just going to run this now and have a look at the trace window. And you notice it's got 11 or 211.5. So this is its X coordinate on screen. So that's his position on the X. Now the way the screen works is 0, 0 is up in the top left, and as you move across the screen, in this case 201 pixel or 211.5 pixels, and that's where he starts. Now the Y position goes down the screen, and we can actually find out where the top corner is by having a look at the Y position. So we go back in our action script. I'm just going to copy and paste that line of code, because to get his Y position we can just change that to Y and go Command Enter. So now I know his X position is Y position. And if we look at where SpongeBob is at the moment, he's right here. We can move him around the screen if we wish. Now notice every time I go back to my code, I actually shut down the runtime apart, because if you don't do that you can have a problem. I've just dropped those together so they stack nicely. So now I can switch between the two. So what we want to do at this point of time is I want to move SpongeBob around. So I'm going to actually change his position and specify where he's going to go. So I know his current X position is Y position, but this time I'm going to talk directly to SpongeBob, and I'm going to go MCSB dot X equals 100, and also MCSB dot Y equals 100. So this should actually move SpongeBob up in the top left hand corner of my screen. So 100 pixels in from the X and 100 pixels down. So let's run this program now. You notice the trace information comes out beforehand, and he's moved across. He's 100 by 100 in, so the rectangle that sits in here. So we can actually move him around as well. So let's have a look at how we get SpongeBob to actually move on screen. Well, what we need to do is actually set up maybe a button, and then as I click the button we could actually move him up the screen, and if we click the button we can move him down the screen. So let's try just doing an up-down sort of action. So once again I'm going to go back down to my GUI layer, and I need to draw a button. So I'm going to make a really simplistic button. I'm just going to put a box out there. At the moment it's got black. I'll keep the black at the moment, and I'll draw another one for down. We'll use this in a moment. So they're both there. Now what I'm going to do is go to my text. I'm going to change my text color. So we'll just wait for this to catch up. So what we'll do now is we'll place some text in there, and I'll change the color to maybe yellow, and I should be able to put up. And we need to sort of change the font size on all this, so I'll just select all this and reduce its size down, slide that up, and we can actually grab him and move him into position. Obviously it's still too big, so we can adjust that down, get it more to a size that is appropriate for the box. If you need to fine move it, just select it, and you should be able to use the arrow keys to just bump that into position. Just move those up. Now this is dynamic text at the moment. Because it's a label, I'm just going to change that to static. Therefore it's a label now, not something that's dynamic and can be altered or changed. Now that's my up. I'm just going to copy and paste and move this into position. So double click in there, and I'm going to change up to down. So I'm nearly made my buttons. At the moment I've got the graphics all set up, so now all I need to do is convert this into a button. So I'm selecting the up button. I've drawn a marquee around it, so I've got not only the background, I've also got the text on it. Go to modify, convert to symbol. This is going to be a button, and I'm going to call it up BTN. And I'm going to do the same thing now right here for the down, and convert this to down BTN. And okay, so now I have an up button and down button. I need to go set all my properties on my buttons. So first of all I'm going to double click and go inside the scene into the button. You notice now I've got an up, over, down and hit state. So I just push F6, F6, F6. That gives me all my states. If I want to make it a little bit interesting, I'm going to grab my overstate and go Command T, and I can actually transform this. I can actually lock my transform together, and I can adjust this to say 110. So if they go over the up button, it grows, and then click on that one. I can shrink this down now to say maybe 90. So if they click down on it, it's going to get a little smaller, and then the hit state's still the same. So if I just run this now with the command enter, as I go over the up and click on it, you can see that there's a bit of action in there. It gives it a bit of a multimedia effect, and it's not a hard one to do. Now notice I've got my up, over, down hit state on my up button, and I'm inside the up button, so you've got to make sure that you leave the up button, go back to the scene, before you double click the down button, and once again repeat the process. F6, 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 click on the over, transform this, change that to 110, click on the down state, once again change this to 90, go back out of the scene, Command Enter. I now have a down button and an up button, so both those are working fine. And because they have hit states, we can actually listen for that hit state. So what we're ready to do now is our programming side of things. So let's go have a look at some code. So select our ActionScript layer, click on our Actions panel. Now we know his position and everything. I'm going to just remove these at the moment. I'm going to move my trace statements out. I'm not too happy with the 100 by 100, but I will be happy with something like 200 by 200. So this is the default position for it. So this will move SpongeBob into a 200 by 200 position, and we're ready now to set an event listener. So the first thing we're going to do is use my up button. Now the button needs a name. Even though I've created the button, once again we need to put a name on it, much the same as we did SpongeBob. And its instance name is the opposite to its library name, which is BTN up. And this one here would be BTN down. So they're their instance names, and that's what we can put. We now talk to this button. Any time we want to refer to this exact button, we use its instance name BTN up. So we can now head back into our code, and I'm going to set up my, first of all, event listeners. So I'm just remming out a line there, so it's a bit of internal documentation, so it's easy to follow. So to set up a listener, what we need to do is use the button BTN up, and we need to add event listener to the button. So I've just given it a command to add an event listener to this button, and then we can actually specify what sort of event listener we would like on there. So in this case we want to use a mouse event, and then we can actually specify what sort of mouse event we want. You can see in here there's a whole list of different mouse events you can have, but we're pretty well going to use the normal one, which is going to be click. We're not going to use right click or any of these other ones, move out, etc. So there's lots of little options in here. We're just going to use click. You can type it in, it's sometimes a lot quicker. But what we need to do is we need to run a function if we do click this button. So even though we've told the event listener to listen for a mouse event, and in particular what mouse events a click, we then need to tell it to do something if it hears it. So in this case here we're going to run a function, so it's going to be F, and we're going to put move up, because this is our up button. I'm just going to close off that line of code. Now when I'm programming with my ActionScripts, I always put my event listeners at the bottom of the code. They're easy to find and easy to handle down there. So once I've got my event listeners set up, I now need to write my functions. So once again, I'm just putting an area in, so I've got all my functions are going to be in here, and I now need to define a function called fMoveUp. So to do that, we need to use the command function, and you notice it's turned blue. Then we can specify the name of the function, which is fMoveUp, and then we need to then give it some properties. So in this case it's an event, EVT, and we're actually, what sort of event is coming in? It's going to be a mouse event. So this function is run by a mouse event, and then we put a command on the end of this void. Now this void command basically says, oh, we're not going to return anything from this function, so we're not going to pass data out of this function to another function. So because it's void, and then we can do a begin brace, which is a curly bracket, and an end brace, which is a closed curly bracket. Now before we go any further, before I start trying to move SpongeBob up the screen, I want to test this function. So I'm going to actually just put a trace in, and then I'm just going to put move up, and this will check that the function's actually working, that the event listener is listening correctly and is calling the right function. There's no use going any further with our code until we've tested this, otherwise if it's not working, it's no point. So I've now run my code. I'm just going to click on the up button, and I should get a trace, move up. So this is just proven that my code is working correctly, and that's what I wanted to see. Okay, so now that we know that that button is working, we can now head back into our code, and I can actually just rem that statement out now. So I'm just going to put 2 lines there. I'm going to keep it, it's no use writing some code and deleting it, even your little test information. It shows the work that you've done in your code beforehand. So now to move SpongeBob up, now we know that I can actually get his X position and his Y position. So to move SpongeBob up, I'm going to talk to SpongeBob and say MC SpongeBob. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually talk to the X-axis of SpongeBob. So point.x. And what I want to do with that, I actually want to move him up. So I'm going to add to, I need to move him up the screen. So in some cases people think they want to add to the y-axis to move him up the screen, but you've got to remember the y-axis is 0, 0 up in the top quadrant here. So really to move SpongeBob up I need to minus. So what I'm going to do is go MCX, well I've already got the wrong axis there, as we realise we want to move him up the y-axis. And to move him up back to 0, 0 I need to actually minus from it. So we're going to go minus equals. And what that's saying is minus this amount from the Y value of SpongeBob. So I'm going to actually take off 20 pixels. Semicolon. So every time I click that button it's going to remove 20 pixels and it should move SpongeBob up the screen. So let's just test that. Click on the up. And as you can see, every time I click it, he moves up the screen. So obviously if I'm going to write a down instance, I got btn down. Now I like to recycle code. So I'm going to recycle the code. So I'm going to copy this whole line and I'm going to paste it. And now I know that btn up is not the right button. Btn down is what I'm looking for. And fmove up obviously is going to become fmove down. And therefore I should be able to copy this function and paste this function and change it rather from fmove up to fmove down. And we know that minus 20 moves him up the screen, so if I add 20 it should move him back down the screen, and this will be moved down. And if I've got a problem with it I can always go back and remove those trace, or the remove the comment tag so the trace comes active again. So let's test our program now after we've just recycled the code. If I move up, yes, that's still working. If I move down, yes, that's working. If I want to set a reset function, so if I click a button maybe called reset, I can put SpongeBob back to his original position by using this 200 by 200. So if I tell SpongeBob to move back to .x200, .y200, he will snap back to his original start position. So that's another button we can add. Now as you go through the task you'll actually find there's other little functions you can add, remove. Remember that alpha works as 1 as solid, and you can actually reduce that by 0.1 and that will slowly transition him back to a see-through object. And have a look at all the different methods and experiment with them and create an interesting sort of presentation with a good sort of image. Sometimes I just use a square for this, but it's much more fun to actually get someone like SpongeBob or any other character you can think of to use it. So I hope you find this helpful to complete the task.